Hey guys, tonight we're winding our way through tangled jungle trails. The air thick with heat and howler monkey calls. Until we find ourselves standing before an ancient stone slab towering, worn, and humming with the silence of time. Moss clings to it like forgotten ivy. But beneath that green fuzz, numbers. Rows and rows of impossibly precise carvings, dots, bars, and strange faces that track time not in days or months, but in cosmic heartbeats. You're looking at a Maya stela, and whether you realize it or not, it's basically a time machine, not one that whirs or blinks, but one that remembers. Because to the ancient Maya, time wasn't a river flowing forward. It was a wheel, a loop that ended and then started over again. And well, you probably won't survive this version of the end, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward through the jungle, brushing past spider webs and sticky leaves until the ruins of a Maya city begin to loom around you, stone pyramids jutting from the canopy like teeth from the mouth of a god. You half expect to see torchlight or the rustle of white cotton garments. But the city's been dead for centuries. Still, the stones haven't forgotten. Neither have the calendars. The Maya didn't just track the passage of days like we do. They sculpted time itself into systems 3, to be exact. First, there was the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar. Then the Hop, a 365-day solar calendar. And finally, the Long Count, the cosmic ledger that really got doomsday preppers riled up in 2012. But for the Maya, that wasn't panic. It was routine. Here's the thing. To a Maya priest, time didn't just pass it stacked. Imagine pancakes made of centuries. Every great event, whether a king's birth or a solar eclipse, happened on a date that echoed with sacred importance. Some dates were hot, thick with spiritual charge, others a little more bland. You wouldn't schedule your corn harvest ceremony on a flat Wednesday of the calendar. No, you'd wait for a spicy date with proper cosmological flavor. What's wild is that they tracked all this using only stone tools and sheer math. Seriously. Try working out base 20 calendrics without a calculator while wearing a jaguar pelt kilt. The Maya were obsessed with cycles, eclipses, Venus's movements, the return of seasons, and they believed that by understanding these patterns they could predict, or even influence, divine events. Mainstream historians agree. The Maya had one of the most sophisticated pre-modern calendar systems on Earth. But here's a fringe theory for your hammer-cold brain. Some scholars think that Tzolk'in's 160 days weren't just symbolic. It might match the average human gestation period. So yeah, your birthday might be written in the stars and in your spleen. You climb one of the ruined temples, brushing ancient dust off a carved step. Each riser is decorated with glyphs, part animal, part god, part number. You're not reading history, you're walking on time. And it's here, at the top, as wind sighs through empty plazas, that it hits you. The Maya didn't fear time ending. They expected it. Like sunrise. Like taxes. It wasn't tragedy, it was maintenance. You settled down on a crumbled ledge, trying to piece together how an entire civilization decided the world ends over and over again. And somehow thought that was fine. Well, for starters, their gods weren't exactly linear thinkers, but we'll get to them soon. For now, just picture this. Every 52 years, a special convergence of the Tzolk'in and Hop calendars occurred. And when that happened, the Maya believed the universe would reset. So they held new fire ceremonies. No fires were allowed for a whole day. Then a fresh flame was lit to restart the cosmic engine. No pressure. Historians still argue whether these 52-year resets were meant to be metaphors or literal world refreshes. But what's clear is that the Maya saw history as full of loops, each echoing with its own drama, gods, and rules. And we see time as a one-way escalator heading to an eventual heat death. Maybe they were onto something. Of course, a looping time theory isn't always comforting. If the world ends and begins again, do your mistakes come back, too? Do old wars play out on repeat? Or is it like a video game save file, you just start over? No memory. Clean slate. It's never made clear. But the Maya didn't seem too worried about it. Their priests didn't scream about apocalypse, they scheduled it. And here's a quirky little sidebar for you. The Maya even tracked time through the behavior of sea creatures. Some codices mention turtles and crocodiles as carriers of cosmic cycles. Imagine checking the end of the world by watching whether a divine sea turtle sneezes. Night's deepening now, and the jungle hum starts to throb with frogs, insects, and the odd rustle of something bigger. The stars, clear and silver above, Might as well be beads on a god's necklace. You close your eyes, and you can almost hear them ticking forward, not toward an end, but toward a bend in the loop, toward the next reset. And before we walk into that great reboot, we'll need to meet the ones pulling the celestial levers. The Maya gods, equal parts terrifying, theatrical, and oddly bureaucratic, car waiting in the wings. You don't just wake up in the Maya cosmos, you're summoned. That's how it feels as the jungle around you warps slightly, as if the vines themselves are twitching with recognition. Somewhere behind the canopy, the heavens are being rewound and rethreaded by unseen hands. And those hands belong to gods who don't merely oversee time, they replace it, like a broken clock part. You step into a ceremonial plaza, real or imagined, it's hard to tell. The air is heavier here, sticky with incense and metaphor. The temple walls aren't just decorated, they're narrating. Dozens of deities dance, wrestle, birth frogs, bleed corn, and occasionally obliterate the world. Welcome to the celestial office of Maya Divine Administration. Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly to discuss your extinction. The Maya pantheon didn't have a single top god. It had a whole quirky roster, some of them ancient and abstract, others oddly specific, like Chikshul, the aged goddess of childbirth, and Floods, who also happens to carry a snake on her head as a casual accessory, or Itzamna, the wise old creator who once disguised himself as a bird, or Bolin Yakkeu, the god of change and destruction, who shows up precisely when things are about to get weird. It's Bolin Yakkeu who stars in one of the most mysterious long count dates, December 21st, 2012. We'll get to that fan-favorite panic button soon. But for now, you watch his glyph, a snarling mask with elaborate headdress, emerging from the wall like he's itching to unmake everything for the 6th time. No biggie. To the Maya, the end of the world wasn't some angry tantrum from a jealous god. It was routine maintenance, a cycle end triggered by gods who were doing their jobs. Imagine them as divine IT techs. Yeah, looks like this creation's glitching again. Let's reboot. You, unfortunately, are probably a cache file. One of the stranger myths comes from the Popalva, the sacred cache. Maya text. It describes how earlier gods failed at making humans. First, they made people from mud. Big mistake. The mud folk couldn't hold their shape and just sort of dissolved in the rain like paper dolls. Then they tried wood. Those people were stiff and clueless. So the gods sent wild animals to attack them. And even their own dogs and cookware turned against them. Yes, their tortillas rebelled. Eventually, the gods got it right. Humans made from maize. Corn people, the real deal. Corn wasn't just food. To the Maya, it was existence. The gods created the final world using maize, sweat, and sacred blood. But here's the thing, they knew it wouldn't last. Even the corn people would have their cycle. The Maya didn't treat these myths as bedtime fables. They carved them into temple walls, performed them in dances, wore them as costumes. And you can't help but think, this wasn't symbolism, this was schedule. Time was set to end, not randomly, but because it had to. A universal expiration date, carefully predicted by divine bureaucrats. Now, picture a pyramid. Not the big, touristy kind you've seen in photos, but one soaked in humidity and ash. At its top, a priest watches the stars, tracking Venus, calculating eclipse patterns, aligning human rituals with divine syncopation. Venus was a huge deal to the Maya, especially its phases. One theory says they even scheduled wars based on Venus's reappearance after disappearing behind the sun. Historians still argue whether these star-born wars were symbolic or brutally real. But either way, the gods were involved. And then there's Xibalba, the Maya underworld, which is equal parts game show and horror movie. Souls didn't just drift there, they were challenged. Think flaming ball courts, collapsing stairways, rivers of pus. But it wasn't punishment. It was initiation. The gods of Xibalba weren't evil, they were part of the machinery. Death wasn't the opposite of life. It was its necessary reset. Here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Some Maya gods were actually twins who took turns dying and reviving. The hero twins, Hunapu and Zbalank, outwitted the lords of Xibalba with trickery, magic, and a healthy disrespect for cosmic authority. They died, came back, died again, and eventually became the sun and the moon. In the Maya cosmos, death wasn't the end. It was just a wardrobe change. Back in your imaginary plaza, a ritual begins. You see flickers of torches, hear the deep beat of drums. A priest begins to chant, his voice curling upward like incense. This isn't a cry for help, it's a notification. The gods are listening, and if they're pleased, the world might get another cycle. But there's tension, too. You can feel it. The Maya were always aware that divine patience could run out if humans neglected rituals, disrespected time, failed to offer blood or dance or prayer, well, who could blame the gods for scrapping the project? That's why some cities performed massive ceremonies at key calendar junctions, offering everything from flowers and incense to human hearts. Yes, it's grim, but not mindless violence. These weren't sacrifices for cruelty's sake. They were cosmic bribes. Please don't unplug the universe. Seems reasonable. Historians still debate the full scale and frequency of these rituals. Some argue the more dramatic acts were rare and ceremonial, while others believe they were tragically routine. Either way, the world's continuity was up for negotiation and the Maya were eager to be heard. You glance up at the stars. There's Venus peeking out again. You half expect the plaza around you to ripple for the gods to step forward in feathered robes and jaguar masks, carrying ledgers of time and expiration codes. But tonight, they seem quiet. Maybe the calendar still has some room left. Maybe you've passed inspection. Or maybe, just maybe, they're resetting the board while you sleep. The stone beneath your feet feels older now, like it's remembering things it shouldn't. You're still in the same temple plaza, but the carvings have changed. Where once they told stories of gods and sacred rituals, now they're recounting failures, 4 of them, big ones. Not just bad harvest or forgotten festivals, but full-scale, cosmic-level whoopsies, and each one ended a version of the world. According to Maya mythology, we're not in the first world. We're not even in the second. We're in the 5th, or maybe the 4th, depending on the regional variant. Again, scholars love a good calendar argument, but what they agree on is that the Maya told of multiple suns, not big gas balls in the sky, but cosmic ages, each governed by different rules, different gods, and ultimately, different dooms. You reach out to trace one of the wall glyphs. It shows jaguars, huge, snarling, more teeth than fur. In the first sun, it said, the world was inhabited by giants, but they didn't worship the gods properly. So the gods summoned jaguars, lots of jaguars. And well, that was that. Clawed into extinction. Honestly, it's an intense way to start your creation myth cycle. No warm-up act. Just big cats and bad vibes. The second sun? The people this time were made of wood. Flimsy souls with no blood, no heart. They didn't honor the gods either. So this version ended with a catastrophic flood so massive that even the sky was said to fall. Bonus twist. Their animals turned against them. Chickens pecked, dogs bit, and the cookware revolted. Yes, pots and pans chased their former owners. A sort of domestic uprising. You're allowed to laugh at that, just a little. The third sun, fire, everything burned. Some say it was divine lightning. Others describe a rain of flaming resin. Either way, the world turned to ash. Ash that still settles in your lungs as you walk the imaginary ruins. Then came the 4th sun. This was closer to our current world. The people were made of maize finally, a creation that pleased the gods. But even this version didn't last. Sky monsters came. Or perhaps it was a massive hurricane, or a cosmic imbalance. No one agrees. All we know is that something snapped, and the world cracked open again. Each of these ages ended with total erasure. Not just mass extinction, but cosmic erasure, as if the gods wiped the hard drive and started fresh. And yet, for the Maya, these resets weren't failures. They were part of the plan. Rehearsals. The gods were learning, maybe even evolving. You sit on a mossy stone, letting your mind unspool. If the world's ended for times already, are we overdue? Is the 5th sun, our sun, already wobbling on its axis? You remember the Maya calendar glyphs, wheels inside wheels, like a divine Swiss watch. Some combinations of dates glowed with danger, others with opportunity. You wonder, what today's date would read in that system? Do the wheels click into something lucky or cursed? Here's your historical anchor. The Maya long count calendar begins in 3114 BCE. That's older than Homer, older than the pyramids of Giza. They saw this as the moment our current age began. From that point forward, every passing day was logged in a base 20 numerical system that stacked time like Lego bricks, counting toward the next cycle reset. Now, the quirky part. That reset was scheduled, a real, numerical doozy, December 21st, 2012. You remember it, don't you? The memes, the documentaries, the calendar panic. That whole thing started because the long count rolled over like a car odometer hitting all zeros. And while most modern scholars believe it simply marked the end of a backed in a 144 zero-day unit of time, others whisper that it was more than symbolic. You'll get the full scoop on that global freakout in the next section. But even now, standing amid the myths of prior destructions, you can feel the tension that builds as a cycle ends. Because the Maya believed each new world came with changes, not just in terrain or weather, but in physics and laws and fate. What works in one world might be fatal in the next. That's why they didn't treat history as useful, just repeatable. You squint at the sky. It's darker now. The stars have shifted, and a cold breeze snakes through the trees. Somewhere out there, perhaps, Bolin Yakkeu is preparing the stage again. Maybe a jaguar is stretching its paws. Maybe your frying pan is watching you. Just in case, historians still argue whether the Five Sons myth was ever meant as literal history, or whether it was a kind of moral instruction: be better humans, or we'll all get reset like the last batch. But what's striking is how emotionally neutral the endings were. No Armageddon, no fiery judgment, just cycles up. Time for a change. The Maya weren't alone in this worldview. Other Mesoamerican cultures like the Aztecs shared similar ideas of repeating ages, failed creations, and gods who needed rituals to keep things humming. It makes you wonder if the land itself breathed in cycles, if volcanoes weren't just eruptions, but exhales from a world tired of holding in its breath. And now, you stand at the edge of a fifth world. Ours, according to some Maya sources, this is the age where humans finally got it right. But no pressure. You only have to maintain the balance of all things through careful ritual, cosmological respect, and probably a few more sacrifices. You head down the steps, your hands brushing the stone walls again. They're not just holding up the temple. They're holding stories, numbers, endings. Worlds dot, and as we step into the next chapter, we'll return to that one date that gripped the world, not in the ancient jungle, but in Times Square. The end of the Maya calendar, December 21st, 2012. And what it meant or didn't mean when the world didn't end. You're back in the modern world now, but not really. You're hovering in that weird, flickering space where memory feels like myth and panic smells like overpriced gasoline. It's December 2012. Office parties are in full swing. Mariah Carey is omnipresent, and half the internet is quietly wondering if the Maya knew something we didn't. People stockpile canned beans and bottled water. Others throw end-of-the-world parties with Mayan-themed cupcakes and ironic doom playlists. And all because a very old calendar had the audacity to stop. Or did it? Let's set the scene. You're curled up on the couch, phone in one hand, maybe a mug of something warm in the other. You scroll past headlines. Maya calendar predicts apocalypse. Scientists say planet Nibiru will smash Earth. NASA denies everything. It's all a bit much. But deep down, in that weird corner of your brain that still checks under the bed, there's a flicker of unease. It all came down to one number, 13.0.0.0.0. That's the date inscribed on Maya stelae for what we know as December 21st, 2012. A full, great cycle of 13 Bactans, that's roughly 5,125 years, was set to end. And what happens when a great cycle ends? Well, if you've been paying attention, maybe a reboot, maybe a new world, or maybe just an incredibly elaborate cosmic shrug. Let's rewind again. The long count calendar is structured a bit like an odometer. It uses 5 stacked units: kin 1 day, unal 20 days, ton 360 days, caton 7, 200 days, and Bactan 140 for 1,000 days. 13 Bactans is a symbolic full turn of the wheel. It's like the clock hits midnight on a cosmic scale, but rather than roll into chaos, the calendar just starts a new cycle. Here's what most Maya scholars agree on: the end of the 13th Bactan wasn't meant to signal destruction but renewal. Fresh cosmic accounting. Imagine the Maya gods sitting at their desks with long feather pens, rolling their necks and saying, "All right, let's open up a new ledger." But somewhere between ancient inscriptions and modern paranoia, the message got mangled. And oh boy, did the internet run with it. One carved monument in particular added fuel to the fire. Tortuguero Monument 6, the stela, found in modern-day Mexico, references the end of the current cycle and the potential return of Bolin Yakkeu, the god of endings and transitions. Remember him. But the inscription is damaged, broken right where it might have said what would actually happen next. Convenient, huh? So of course, conspiracy theories blossomed like mold in a wet cave. Some whispered about a hidden planet Nibiru that would slam into Earth. Others claimed polar shifts would flip gravity, or solar flares would fry all electronics. There was even a corner of the internet convinced the world would ascend into a higher dimension, and we'd all turn into light beings, which frankly sounds exhausting. Meanwhile, actual Maya communities were like, "Excuse us, that's not what this means at all." To them, the end of the 13th Bactan was a reason for reflection, ceremony, and cosmic gratitude, not full-blown panic. In Guatemala, thousands gathered for sunrise rituals, burned incense, played drums, and offered thanks to the gods. No bunkers, no sirens, just continuity. You sip your drink and scroll back in your mind. You remember how the date came and went. December 21st, 2012. Nothing exploded. The earth didn't vanish. Your dog still needed feeding, and the electricity bill still arrived. The most dramatic thing that happened was a mild internet outage in Wisconsin. And yet, wasn't there something kind of magical about how much attention that date received? For one shimmering moment, the whole planet turned to an ancient worldview and asked, is this it? Does time work like we think it does? Here's your historical fact of the section. Archaeologists confirm the Maya never predicted an apocalypse. In fact, some inscriptions go far beyond 2012. There's even a reference to a date 7,000 years in the future, a time no priest ever expected to reach, but still bothered to write down. Now that's confidence in your calendar. Here's your fringe tidbit. A few theorists believe the Maya knew of precession, the 26,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis, and aligned their calendar not to days or years, but to the shifting position of the heavens themselves. If true, that means they weren't tracking time, but the shape of time. And here's your scholarly shrug. Historians still argue whether the long count structure was numerological poetry or astronomical precision. Was it a spiritual metaphor, or a gear in some forgotten cosmic machine? We may never know. You close your eyes, picturing a priest centuries ago, dressed in jade beads and red paint, standing before Stella as he carves that final glyph, 13.0.0. 0.0. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't panic. To him, it's just a page turning, a breath in the lungs of the universe. And maybe that's why the date stuck with us. Not because the world was going to end, but because deep down, we're all waiting for a reset button. A way to say, that was one cycle. Let's try again. You step back from your imaginary news feed, from the clickbait headlines and survival kits. The jungle presses, and again, the old stelae return. The stone calendars keep turning, unbothered by our confusion. For them, December 21st, 2012 was just another ritual, a cosmic paperclip clicking shut. But there's one last mystery left. If cycles truly never end, if time is a wheel, not a line, then what does that say about the Maya themselves, about their disappearance, about legacy? That's where we'll go next. To the cycles that never die and the people who still carry their echoes. You're walking through ruins again, but this time something's different. The vines are thicker, yes. The air more humid, but it's not just age. It's absence. The city around you, stone walls, ceremonial platforms, a grand pyramid swallowing. The sun feels too quiet. No incense curls, no priest chants, no soft thud of bare feet against limestone. A civilization this intricate, this mathematically obsessed, this artistically lush. Where did it go? You're not the only one wondering. The so-called collapse of the classic Maya civilization between the 8th and 10th centuries. CE still baffles scholars. Monument buildings ceased. Cities were abandoned. The jungle swallowed everything up again, as if time looped backward. And yet, the people didn't vanish. Not entirely. Here's your mainstream fact for the road. Millions of Maya descendants still live today in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They speak dozens of Maya languages, carry on weaving, farming, and storytelling traditions. And yes, still observe rituals tied to sacred calendars. The civilization collapsed, but the people endured. The cycle turned but never broke. Some scholars call what happened a disintegration of complexity. Sounds clinical, right? But what it means is that systems that were too tightly bound over crowded cities, resource exhaustion, fragile water networks snapped under pressure. There was drought, too. Maybe a long one. A few decades without reliable rain, and suddenly, that brilliant long count calendar couldn't grow you enough corn. But remember how the Maya saw time. Not as a straight march into progress, but as a spiral. To fall out of alignment with the gods, to miss a sacred ritual. To overstep your cosmic bounds was to risk imbalance. Not punishment, just consequence. Like skipping oil changes on a divine engine. There's even a fringe theory that the Maya themselves knew a major cycle of civilization was ending. That they stopped building monuments not out of defeat, but out of respect for the clock winding down. A kind of collective ritual. Silence. About a time itself. Of course, that's poetic. Possibly nonsense. But in a world where people once believed tortillas could rebel, can you really say what's nonsense anymore? And here's your final scholarly shrug. Historians still argue whether the classic Maya collapse was slow erosion or sudden catastrophe. Did kings lose legitimacy? Did trade routes rot? Did climate doom them? Or were they architects of their own undoing? Maybe all of it. Maybe none. But what's clear is that even as the cities faded, the calendar didn't. The cyclical view of time persisted, not just among the Maya, but across cultures and centuries. We find it in Hindu yugas and Norse Ragnarok, in Hopi prophecies and Buddhist kalpas. Even your smartphone calendar repeats anniversaries. Even your sleep repeats every night. And now, maybe, your view of history is starting to loop a little too. You sit beneath the ceiba tree, sacred to the Maya symbol of the three realms, the underworld in its roots, the earthly world in its trunk, and the heavens in its branches. The wind rustles above. The bark smells faintly of something old and electric. And for a moment, you wonder, what if this is just one loop of many? One turn of a gear in a god's long-forgotten machine, because the Maya didn't fear endings. They expected them, and more than that, they planned for them. Their calendars weren't warnings. They were invitations to mark time, to honor cycles, to understand that nothing stays, and nothing's ever truly gone. It's why they didn't write prophecies in fire and brimstone, but in corn and stars. Their gods didn't end the world in fury, but in order, maintenance, reset, like turning the page of a sacred book, or changing the batteries in the universe. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the Maya were really telling us. Not beware, but remember. Not the end is coming, but the cycle returns. And when it does, don't panic. Light a fire, say a prayer, plant something, because the world doesn't end. It renews. So now, as the jungle quiets and the stone calendars sleep again under moss and moonlight, you feel your thoughts soften. The panic of apocalypses, the mystery of vanished cities, the hum of vanished drums, all of it folds itself gently away. Like the last page of a well-loved book, the stars above, the same ones watched by Maya astronomers in their woven robes, glow soft and silver, threaded into the sky's dark quilt. They tick forward in patterns older than pyramids, patient and slow, not racing toward doom but gently turning, waiting for the next reset, the next story, the next version of you. The idea that time could bend, fold, or loop no longer feels strange. It feels kind. Because if the end is never truly the end, then maybe nothing is ever really lost. Maybe what we call endings are just the quiet spaces between heartbeats, between dreams, between turns of the wheel dots. So breathe slower now. Let the myths settle like dust on your pillow. Let the gods return to their stone thrones, their jaguar skins folded, their obsidian blades tucked away. For now, the calendar keeps turning. And you? You have time. Time to dream. Time to wake again in another cycle. Time to remember that endings are just beginnings in costume. Close your eyes. The world isn't ending tonight. It's only beginning again.